Tom, I want to jump into the election or the by-election last night, but I want to start with a note that you sent earlier today.
Yes.
Because people ought to know this. You know, you stop talking about it, we assume that things are getting back to normal. You had a
Yes.
friend go to the SAAQ office in St. Agathe, not in Montreal, in
Nope.
St. Agathe. And what
Yes.
happened?
The lineup at the SAAQ office, for licenses and such, was around the building. And so I've always said, well, don't try sources, don't try the big ones in the West Island or downtown. Go to the smaller ones. And there is a really nice, perfectly, equipped, they can do all the regular stuff, office of the SAEQ in St. Agathe. The only thing they don't do is driving tests. You have to go to St. Jerome for that. So a friend of mine was there today and said, Tom, you remember saying about St. Agathe, how good it was? I said, yeah. He says, okay, it's wrapped around the building, the whole line. So I guess that the Eric Care touch, everything that he brought to public administration is going to continue for quite some time because the computer system, of course, is conked out and you just can't get normal stuff done. Your tax dollars at work. François Legault is very proud of Eric Care and is keeping him in cabinet. I thought you ought to know.
Who's left to fire on this?
Exactly. Well, they fired the senior bureaucrat who was there, who had a sterling reputation, by the way. But he was never going to put a hand, on his guy, Eric Kerr, because Eric Kerr was his pit bull when he was in opposition, and he owes him a lot. He knows where all the dead bodies are buried. So for some reason, he's leading a charmed life right now, because it's certainly not because of the job that he's doing that he's still a minister.
So nothing's gotten better. It would seem everything's gotten worse, yeah?
I tried to use the website. It is absolutely, you cannot navigate. It is pathetic. Wow. It is so bad. I don't even have the words to express how pathetic
and
it is.
I say it with a smile on my face, but they're actually, for people on my end of the age spectrum, there is an age algorithm, because I always find it difficult, much more difficult to, I always have to ask one of my sons to help me when something goes south. But when people can't, nobody, no matter how, even if they spend their whole lives working on computers, can't hack this system just to get a simple operation done. It's the whole thing is backwards, and they're not going to apologize for it, because Legault never apologizes for anything that he does wrong, and he never even admits he does anything wrong. So
why can't we get the people who designed the SAQ site to do the SAAQ site? The SAQ site seems to work really well. I mean,
because they make a lot more money selling you booze than they do trying to take of your driver's license and your registration.
Still think it's an idea. Tom, let's talk about the by-election. I use this as a jump-off point for my question today. 29.6% voter turnout, which is absolutely embarrassing, worst of all the by-elections in Canada. So quick summary. What did you take from all this?
Well, I think it goes back to a discussion we had and a point that Natasha had made a couple of times, that there were a lot of people who were voting with their feet. That, they'd been lifelong Liberals, they lived in NDG Westmount after all, and they just weren't going to vote this time. And I think that's what happened. So Anna Gainey got, as a percentage of the vote, pretty darn close to what Mark Carno got, a little bit below, but not much. And she got elected with 15% of the registered voters voting for her. So it's like you say, it's not a great result if you really care about our democracy, but there's nothing illegitimate about her win. She's congratulations, Anna Gainey, on becoming the new MP for NDG Westmount. But it is a shame that so many people had the only way they could express their frustration with C13. I think, from everything I was hearing, was to just say, I'm staying home. I'm not even going to bother voting this time around.
Wouldn't it be nice if she would talk to us? Because so she's my new MP. I would love to get to know her a little bit. She did grant us one interview a few weeks back, but now that she's won, what's there to risk? Why is she still not talking, Tom?
I could not possibly explain that, because normally you do a victory lap the day after an election like that, and you would have thought that somebody in her entourage would have explained to her that CJAD is far and away the most listened to English language radio station in Greater Montreal. But maybe she's not aware of that yet.
All right, I have two questions. When we took calls on this, asking basically why, is it apathy, frustration, or just, resignation that, to the idea that nothing is ever going to change? And I get the sense, Tom, and, with the political background you have, I'm not sure, maybe I'm wrong, that cynicism has ever been this high when it comes to politics. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong, because it's the flip side of what we're going through with the social media, because people get alternative realities all the time. I was doing a French panel show on Friday, and we interviewed Maxime Bernier, and he pulled a full Donald Trump. You remember when Donald Trump brilliantly suggested that, maybe people should be injecting themselves with disinfectant during the COVID-19 pandemic? And then when he was called on it for being a blithering idiot, he said, well, you didn't understand. I was being sarcastic. And that's become his line. Whenever he's called out on that particular bit of stupidity. He says he was being sarcastic. Well, guess what Maxime Bernier said when we threw back at him? Word for word what he had said, because he had said, I'll bet you that these forest fires are being set by environmentalists to prove their crank theory that there's such a thing as global warming and climate change. Because, of course, as you know, it's just something that's been made up by environmentalists. And so he was called on that. And you know what he said? Oh, apparently you don't understand that I was being sarcastic. And then within a nanosecond of having tried to use that particular dodge, he went on to say, but I'll point out that the government of Danielle Smith in Alberta has asked the RCMP to find out if there aren't some people who have been setting these fires. And, there are cases where it can be man-made, these fires. So after trying to slip away from an obviously ridiculous statement that environmentalists were setting the forest fires, he says, I was just being sarcastic, but then he starts explaining why, maybe it's not wrong. So that's the art of the conspiracy theory in a nutshell. You just keep spinning stuff and enough people glom onto it and they catch on and they start repeating the same stuff. So to your previous question, why are we living this now? It's because you're up against a wall of nonsense. So people, convince themselves that masks during the pandemic were part of a vast government conspiracy, and then they occupied downtown Ottawa because they were so sick of being told, why don't you just be careful not to propagate this pandemic because it's really a bad thing and a lot of people have died. No, that's the government trying to take away my freedom. So that's where we are. That's the world we live in today.
Okay.
We just got a note, by the way, so maybe Anna Gainey or Anna Gainey's people were listening, but it turns out she has confirmed she will join Andrew Carter tomorrow morning at 8:10 a.m. So very much.
There you go.
Yeah,
okay.
There you go.
I have another dumb question, Tom. I was kind of wondering. So we know Bill C-13 now requires royal assent.
Yeah.
And all that means is, I guess, what do they run it over to the Governor General? She stamps it and we're good to go, right?
Yeah, well, sometimes she'll come over,
okay.
and sign it in the precinct. And sometimes it's brought over to her.
Okay.
It just requires her signature on behalf of His Majesty the King.
Let me ask the question: what if she decides? What if Mary Simon was to decide? You know what? Based on everything I've heard about this, I'm not going to go ahead and do this. Can she do that?
Of course, but it won't happen. It's never happened.
Ever?
I think you have to go back to the Bing King fight back in the 1920s or something like that. I think that, the very idea of the representative of the king refusing to bow to the will of the duly elected parliament, that would be like David Johnson saying he's not going to listen to a majority vote of parliament. Oh, no, that actually happened.
Yeah,
but no, in all seriousness, there's not the slightest chance that Mary Simon would do that. And I'm rarely so categorical. I always try to leave myself some wiggle room, but this ain't going to happen. What, is somebody spinning that or just looking at it?
No. I just brought it up. I wonder, could it possibly
legally?
Long
absolutely.
shot.
Legally, she could just take off her glasses and say, I ain't signing this thing. It's terrible.
How cool
Can you call her, Tom? Could you call her and ask her
Have a
on
word
our
with her?
behalf?
You get another kick at the cat when the general election comes, probably sooner rather than later.
I have another question I wanted to ask based on something we talked about yesterday. We mentioned that story, that school bus driver who was talking to those special need kids and said they should speak. Has that gained any traction on in French media?
I have not seen a word about it.
Oh, wow.
Doesn't mean that there hasn't been an article. There might have been. But I saw the great reporting that was done over the weekend by CTV. Really, really good journalism by our gang. And no, I don't. And again, maybe I don't read every line of every paper, but I haven't seen anything about it referenced in the French media.
Okay.
Maybe somebody will send us a note about that too and say, no, it appeared here, but I haven't seen it. So far.
Please do if anybody has seen it. You just made a little sidebar comment that you think the election might be coming now sooner rather than later. Is that because of the outcome of these by-elections?
Well, I think that Trudeau realizes that the more time he gives to Poilievre, the stronger he gets. Mm-hmm. I think Trudeau also knows that he's got a best before date stamped on his back. And after 8 years in office, it'll be 8 years, come the fall, come September. I think that Trudeau's going to be saying, I got to come to a decision here. So the article that just went online and will be in the paper Gazette tomorrow is essentially, look, he's got to hit reset. So the minimum, he's got to do a serious cabinet shuffle, and then he can do a deeper reset that could include prorogation. So if you prorogue, you get rid of the committees during the summer, and the opposition parties don't get a chance to keep bothering you all summer, and Trudeau can just hit the barbecue circuit and see what his numbers are like in the polls when he comes back in the fall. When you hit prorogation, you also get to decide when Parliament comes back, because the calendar, it goes out the window as well. So it gives him a lot of flexibility as to when or when not to bring back Parliament, because he's giving back a megaphone to Pierre Poilievre. If he brings him back into question period, he's just giving that chance to Poilievre. I don't know if you remember this term. that Trudeau used. He described in an interview in the States his fight with Patrick Brazeau, the senator. He said Brazeau was the perfect foil. Somehow he decided to use that term. I think that Trudeau sees Pierre Poilievre as the perfect foil for a battle royal, an epic battle between his more progressive view and the strong, strident, doctrinaire right-wing view of Pierre Poilievre. And I think that Trudeau pretty well finds that irresistible. So there will be people telling him, this is your legacy mandate. Look at what you've accomplished. Look at what you did during the pandemic. You did so well. And look at this dental care program you put together with the NDP. Why don't you just, look at all the good stuff that you've done and go take some directorships on the boards of directors of some of the world's largest companies. And I think that that's tempting for him. But I also think that he's going to find it very hard to resist his great battle with Poilievre.
Agreed.
All right. We shall see. Tom, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Take good care.
All right.